King Jimmy. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
There he
Thank
is.
you for
There he
joining
is.
us. How are you today?
Oh, sorry for all of the troubles.
Oh,
I
that's
am in
okay.
Farmtown, Pennsylvania.
Well, we appreciate your time and joining us, and can't believe you had to drive down the road. Thanks so much for doing that, King.
No problem. It's nice to be here, and it's very rad to be talking with you.
It is rad to have you. Let me
Love it.
give everybody a little bit of background on you, and then we'll dive into the conversation. Jimmy Nguyen is a global blockchain advocate, and especially for the Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, which I know several people here listening now are familiar with that and that protocol. He has a 21-year career as an IP and digital technology lawyer. He was named one of the 500 leading lawyers in America at the age of 36. He graduated law school incredibly young. Also, formerly the chair of the State Bar of California's Intellectual Property Law Section and co-chair of the Beverly Hills Association of IP, Internet, and New Media Section. He is a longtime diversity advocate, and he co-chaired the California Minority Council program and was inducted into the California Minority Council's Hall of Fame. King Jimmy is fresh back from the BSV blockchain in Dubai, and they have another convention coming up at the end of May, the BSV Global Blockchain Convention. I think that's May 24th, but I'll let Jimmy speak on that. And Jimmy, you can unmute your mic and join us whenever you want. I just muted you for a moment because we had a little bit of feedback there. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I did just get back to the U.S. from Dubai a couple of days ago, and can't wait to host many of you back in Dubai for our global blockchain convention, May 24th, 25th, and 26th. Two of the top rad guys, Brooklyn Eric and Tony Mugavero, will be there speaking. So join in person or tune in on live stream.
Awesome. Where would the live stream be at?
That's a very good question. It's if you register on the website for the event, which is globalblockchainconvention.com, globalblockchainconvention.com, eventually they'll send you a link. And I think in the past we've live streamed on a separate conference platform as well as on YouTube.
Awesome. So let's start with your career. It's very interesting that you've been in IP as long as you have, and then the huge changes to IP and the new advances in tech and NFTs and ownership. And you graduated so young. I'd like to start there. What year did you graduate? How old were you? And how in the world do you know at such a young age, I'm going to be an attorney? This is what I'm doing. And it seems like you just dove in whole body. I'm an attorney as soon as possible. Was that a childhood dream of yours that you pursued, or was there something else driving you there?
That's a really good question. I'm not really sure I remember the moment I decided to go to law school and be a lawyer. I always thought about it because my father was a federal judge in South Vietnam before my family went to Vietnam, the night before Saigon fell in 1975. So growing up in the U.S., I always knew one of my parents wanted one of their sons to be a lawyer. My older brother did not become a lawyer. And I know it's a little stereotypical to say, but a lot of Asian, families, especially Asian immigrant families in the U.S., a lot of their kids end up going to medical school or engineering school. My older brother became an electrical engineer for a while, and I just had I was actually really good at all the math and science classes when I was younger. Actually even better than sort of the language and social studies type classes, but I just was not that interested in it. So I always thought about law, and when I was in high school as well as in college, I was a competitive speaker and debater. So I used to compete in forensics competitions all across the U.S. And especially in the college level, I did very well. I was a 7-time national gold medalist.
Wow, that's awesome. That's crazy.
So I thought about, and a lot of people from that forensics field, so shout out to all my speech and debate, friends out there, go on to law school. It's a very logical career path because, the speech and debate world prepares you to think, to outline, logic points, to argue, and to advocate for things. So since I wasn't really interested in going to medical school or engineering school, I thought about law. I knew, my parents, it would make them happy. And it's not the only reason you do something. But it was a logical choice, and I decided to go. What's weird when I look back in time is I did finish school relatively young. So I finished, college at UCLA at 19.
Wow.
And so when I was and when you're applying for grad school, right, when you're in the United States, you start thinking about it at least a year or two before, right, you graduate from college, since you have to, in my case, take the LSAT exam, start preparing to apply for law schools. So in hindsight, when I think about it, I was applying for law school, getting ready to go at age 18. Which when I look back in life, I don't think anyone really knows what they want to do with themselves at age
Right,
18.
right. Even
So
if you think
I
you
was,
do. Yeah.
yeah, you think you do, you're precocious, you go, no, I'm smart, I know what I'm
Uh-huh.
doing. And looking back in hindsight, I probably had like no clue what I was
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
It seemed like a logical choice. And it worked out well. I mean, I got a full scholarship to USC Law School, which is one of the reasons I chose going to there. So it fit really well, and I'm glad I did it. But looking back, I would have told my younger self to, maybe taken another year or two, either in university or taking a gap year, which is something that's more commonly done today, but not back then. This is in the early 90s. And, just really thought about it some more.
Awesome. So what was the IP? What was the IP angle, and what was your interest in that? Did you see that being a huge piece of the puzzle to the future of technology, and were you interested in media at the time?
So, looking back in time, so I was in law school and graduating law school right when the internet boom was happening. So this is the 1990s. Like I entered law school in 1992, graduated in 1995. And for those of you old enough to remember it, that's when email and internet browsers, were all emerging.
Hmm.
And I was in Los Angeles. And when you are in law school and wanting to be a young lawyer in LA, the you know key industry in LA, with all the marquee companies and clients, is the entertainment and media industry.
Right.
And all the
Sure.
major
Sure.
movie studios there, television networks. That's the industry everybody wants to get in there. And when I graduated from law school, I was precocious, right? You always want to stand out and make a name for yourself as a young lawyer. It takes a long time to work your way up the ranks, because the entertainment media industry was very popular. I was thought a lot about in the beginning, how do I differentiate myself, especially from older lawyers? One of the things I know now is that clients do want lawyers with experience. And when you're young, you think you can,
Right.
do it all, but in hindsight, you do need experience.
Uh-huh.
But the internet boom was happening. And the entertainment and media companies in particular were looking at the internet very quizzically, both as a threat, right? Because this was also the era of peer-to-peer file sharing, and then eventually things like YouTube came into being, which threatened for a while, I think, the entertainment media business model. So I decided that really interested me. It was the internet boom was happening. I worked in the entertainment media city, and I started just sort of diving into that world and deciding myself, I'm going to learn this and be, the young whippersnapper lawyer who can help
Mhm.
entertainment and media companies navigate this new internet and digital world.
Awesome. That's pretty great foresight there. And then as it's evolved, what an epic start to your journey to end up where you are now. And where did you
It's
first
a bit
hear
full
about
circle,
Bitcoin?
actually.
Yeah, it really seems. Yeah, it's like that's like all your. It's like you've combined everything into one perfect career that is BSV. That's every. It's like all media and everything on chain is a pretty great place for an IP lawyer with your experience to be, sharing your talents with us. So, I appreciate that journey for what you've delivered to us. Thank you. When did you first hear about Bitcoin, and when did you get interested in it? And I'm interested to know if, like, as soon as you heard it, if about it, and the first time, I'm not sure if it was, high level or low level, but did the IP piece of that even click, or was it more, were you looking at it as a currency and energy as opposed to storing content and things?
So over the course of my legal career, the types of legal work I did expanded, not just for entertainment and media clients, but I sort of became known as sort of the digital tech and IP lawyer for many different industries, including the fintech space. Online gaming was really big and popular, and consumer products, and a whole range of industries. So by the end of my career, I was representing Microsoft, Amazon, Uber, and fintech companies, as well as banks, retail establishments, and it wasn't really the entertainment media industry that introduced me to Bitcoin. It was some of my fintech clients as well as online game clients. And I would say it was probably around 2011 or 2012, which was a couple of years after Bitcoin had emerged. I'd heard about it in the news, sort of read about it, didn't pay that much attention to it. But, as a tech lawyer, you always have to learn whatever is the newest technology, just like lawyers today are having to learn about blockchain. And some of my clients in both the online game space started calling me about it. There's different types of online gaming. There's the online gambling, right, which happens across the world. They were the first industry to start accepting Bitcoin as a payment alternative, since they had issues often with payment service providers and banking. Secondly, the traditional online sort of video game type clients, they started calling me about using not Bitcoin, but other forms of virtual items and creating maybe their own virtual currencies inside games to do some of the things we talk about now with BSV, like micropayments, right? Or what are virtual items now, NFTs. So I started looking at it from that perspective. Then one of my fintech clients in Canada was looking at Bitcoin and creating their own virtual currency system to make the process of international money remittance more efficient.
Wow.
For example, sending money from Canada back to the Philippines. There's a lot of migrant workers from the Philippines who, for example, move to Vancouver and send money back to their families, but it's very expensive to send it through remittance services, maybe 6 to 8, often 10% of the amount sent. And so this client looked at started talking with me about Bitcoin generally and new virtual currency systems. We applied for some patents for a virtual currency system for them. And that was the one client that most started talking to me about Bitcoin and what its potential was. And so all of this started happening, I would say, around 2011, 12, and 13. It just kept escalating.
Wow. So at what point did you stop practicing law and jump into Bitcoin advocacy full time?
Well, that started when the name Craig Wright surfaced in my life. In I believe it was 2015, which is what sort of started the journey to what I'm doing now. And at the time, I didn't really grasp how much I was going to be thrown into the battle over the soul and future of Bitcoin. And if someone had told me that in the beginning, I might have run away scared. But here I am.
Yeah. Well, that's a great transition. So, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is here with the forks of Bitcoin and over the past 4 years, 5 years now, and as you know, Bitcoin SV came into the cut and came into the world. There's a claim by Craig Wright to be Satoshi and to have restored the Bitcoin protocol to its original form, and that being much less friction for users and an actual peer-to-peer cash system. So as that came into your world, Jimmy, how did that develop into your relationship with BSV? Did it click right away of this is the answer and this is where I'm putting my energy, and how did that develop into where you guys are now? And we could get into even the Kleiman case if you'd like to give some high level on that or anything like that. I'm not even sure what you'd want to talk about there.
Yeah, well, this is a whole long story, which probably make for a great book one day.
It sure will.
But in short form, when I first got introduced and heard about Craig and got introduced to the idea of leaving, my law practice and joining the Bitcoin and blockchain world full time, there was no BSV at the time, at least as a separate ticker symbol. We have to go back in time here. This was around 2015. There were, for people who follow Bitcoin, and in a short summary for people who don't know anything about what we're talking about, there's been this battle over many years within the Bitcoin world about whether the Bitcoin blockchain, its network, should scale bigger, meaning whether you increase the capacity of the network through what's called its block size to fit more transactions into the network so that they can be done faster and, more importantly, for low fees, so that the network is used for its intended purpose, which we believe from the title of the Satoshi white paper to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash network, meaning you use Bitcoin in daily life to make cash payments digitally. That's not what Bitcoin, in the form people think about it today under the ticker symbol BTC, has become, because it's become mostly just this investment asset that people buy for, I believe, speculative reasons. And nobody uses Bitcoin in daily life to pay, and that's not what it was created to be. So back in 2015, this was when the Bitcoin community was battling internally about, should we increase the data capacity of the network? Should we keep it currently what it is, which only allows a maximum of 7 transactions on the blockchain, maximum across the entire world? The analogy I like to use is go back to the early days of the internet and remember how slow it was to download an MP3 music file, from your modem.
All
Right?
day.
Yeah,
Had to wait
all day.
overnight sometimes.
Absolutely. And so, and the internet as we know it today would not exist with all the services we rely upon, including Twitter Spaces here, right? If the data capacity of internet services and applications did not expand. And so we benefit as a world, right, by faster, more data-powered internet services. And so my view, and a lot of the Bitcoin community have the same perspective with respect to Bitcoin, but there was a big disagreement. BTCs, protocol developers would not increase the block capacity. Therefore, it wasn't really going to be useful for a daily payment system. Some forces basically decided to fork the network to create a version of Bitcoin that at the time in 2017 was called Bitcoin Cash, to increase the capacity and therefore move more towards this version of Bitcoin as a daily useful payment and data vehicle. And then we supported that for a while. And then in 2018, there was another internal fight that I helped lead, the fight on the side of what is now Bitcoin SV, BSV, which stands for Satoshi Vision, to really just scale the network even bigger to make it useful at the biggest levels for data and even tiny micropayments. So all of this happened from 2015 to ultimately 2018 when BSV split off as its own ticker symbol. When I first entered the blockchain world full time, all of these different versions of Bitcoin didn't exist. There was just BTC. And I will say, when I first created my first Coinbase wallet, it only supported 3 coins, BTC, Ethereum, and Litecoin. We didn't live in the world of, thousands of cryptocurrencies like we do today. So I joined and left law because, one, I was interested in doing something more from a business perspective after 21 years of lawyering. But I was really interested in the idea of Bitcoin and blockchain as the next major data network of our lifetime, because I had lived the revolution of the internet, right? I had been a young professional, worked with companies all over the world on how they could adapt their business models to this new thing called the internet. And then I saw the same thing happening with Bitcoin and blockchain technology for payments more efficiently, but more importantly for data usage, which is not something people think about when they think about Bitcoin. So that's what attracted me to what I'm doing now. And it led to being involved in this multi-year battle over the future of Bitcoin.
Great. I really appreciate you going back and giving everybody that update. I've been here a long time and sometimes forget that everybody doesn't have the same historical references that I have over the years of following so closely. So as a big Bitcoin advocate myself, I got in 2011, 2012. And when I first saw it, that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to store everything on chain. And I thought that's where we were headed. And at about 2015, I had some other things in my life pick up steam, and I stopped paying as much attention to crypto as I was. And as I took a couple years of not really paying attention and come back to the block size wars, if you will, I was very excited and optimistic about the opportunities that a bigger block would allow myself and creators, and would, just as an artist putting music out there, and collecting royalties and things, and really not having any no transparency at all, no auditing capabilities of what's actually happening. This to me looked like the future. And I know Brooklyn's told you, but the moment I was able to upload a song to the BSV network, I did so. And I'm pretty sure I was the first. I may have been like the second by an hour. So I think there might be somebody that would challenge me on being the first, but I was definitely like day one, the day I did an 80 transaction concatenation that basically put all of my song Forever and Now into 80 different transactions, and then the 81st combined all of those to be able to be streamed from Bitcoin. And that was a huge day in my life. That was February 2018. And that to me was solidified. Like I get goosebumps. I'm dead serious. I get goosebumps saying this because I think it's such, it is the future. It is an incredible application that I really don't think people are thinking in the right ways about Bitcoin, like you said, of the data and the storage solutions. And it's really interesting to me that the person claiming that they are Satoshi is saying this and is saying that this is the future. This is how data will move. This is the way things will go. And for all the listeners out there, Rad recently closed a deal, a venture deal with Air Ventures, and we are beginning our build on the BSV chain. And we have a lot of huge plans for BSV and how we're going to be a cross-chain platform that uses BSV primarily as a reconciliation tool and a ledger of truth for everything for creators moving forward. So as you gave us that great background, Jimmy, what was the next step that you guys took? As you know, you're seeing these forks and you're watching this happen. I'd love any insight you could give us on what that process was like, and maybe a little bit of inside scoop on the fork away from Bitcoin Cash and what that was like. Was it as tumultuous on the inside as it looked from the outside, and what was the energy like?
Well, wow. Okay, that's a deep question. I've tried to block this out of my memory for the last like
I
post-traumatic
don't want to
stress
bring up
disorder.
trauma. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
want to. I don't
no,
want to
no,
bring
no.
up any trauma.
In,
You're funny.
yeah. Yeah, we lived the world's first ever Bitcoin hash war. That'll go down in history. In short, I think for people who follow the BCH versus BSV battle, what really I think led to the conflict and the split is not what was apparent publicly. From the public's perspective, it was a battle over three features in a new version of the client software that there was disagreement on between the lead protocol developers for Bitcoin Cash, which at the time was Bitcoin ABC, and then our side, which wanted other things. But to the public, it was a battle over block size.
Mm-hmm.
The other side wanted to stay at 32 megabyte blocks, which is still relatively small. We wanted to go up to, I believe at the time, 128, but keep going bigger. And then over a battle of a couple of opcodes, which are
the OP return.
things. Yeah, things in the Bitcoin scripting language about whether to change the Bitcoin protocol or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's what publicly was seen as what caused the conflict. But I think what I can say now is that there's something much more deeper at issue. The block size, let me explain this in kind of practical terms. It wasn't about whether the block size should be 32 or 128 or 256, whatever it is. It was about a philosophical difference about what the Bitcoin network should be used for. The forces on the BCH side at the time were very focused, and they still are, on use of Bitcoin purely for its electronic cash function. Right, only just for payments, and in particular for payments that are out of the control or minimized from the control of government and establishment. That's really what there was a huge philosophical difference, because their argument was, well, there's not enough transactions on the network to warrant increasing the block size as much as we wanted. Why do you need to go to 128 megabytes? Why do you need to go to 256 megabytes? We can't even fill 32 megabytes. And that is a valid point if the only purpose of Bitcoin was to create a network that's only used by crypto hobbyists. Mm-hmm. Right? That our vision was completely different. Was
well, if you build it, they will come. It's not very
bingo. Bingo. It's like saying I'm going to build a highway and I'm only going to build one lane or two lanes, but I want I want a lot of cars to come. They won't come if the highway is too small.
Yeah, Eisenhower had a better idea.
Yeah. And so we also viewed the Bitcoin network as capable of use at a mass global level, just like the internet is, and not just from crypto hobbyists, but by all consumers, billions of people around the world, enterprises, governments. We also wanted the Bitcoin network used for enterprise data applications. And some of the things we're doing now on BSV, data integrity, smart contracts, tokens, all of that requires more data capacity. Even doing what you did, which is uploading a music file to the blockchain so that it's accessible forever, and you as the creator can get paid through it. Just uploading the whole file to the chain could not have been done if we had followed the path of the BCH supporters, right? They would not have increased the data capacity, not just of the block, but of the particular opcode, op return that was necessary for you to be able to do that. So it was just a really philosophically difference of opinion, which is, what is the Bitcoin network supposed to be used for? Should it be used for just cash payments that we want to keep private and out of the hands of government scrutiny, which is what really the Bitcoin Cash community was advocating for? Or should the Bitcoin network be useful for everything? Right. And by that, I mean not just payments and micropayments, but so much of the data capabilities that we're seeing now on blockchain. We said we want it useful for everything, which is why we want the block size to not just be big, but to be massive one day, and why we want to restore the original Bitcoin protocol, and why we think it's important that we build a legally compliant system and ecosystem, because that's the only way this grows to massive adoption. If you want to create a network where it's just people sending payments to keep privately among themselves and avoid KYC and AML compliance, then, we're not your people. I mean, that's what led to the conflict, right. And in terms that I think people may not have understood at the time.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people still understand that. A lot of people think they can do things on Bitcoin that are they're acting as a ghost. They're able to send whatever energy they want, and we're getting some feedback. Yeah, I think that's coming from you, Jimmy. I'm sorry if you could maybe mute for a moment, but we're getting to the point of, I forget what I was going to say now. So what were we talking about, Jimmy? I'm sorry, I forget.
Well, so KYC, AML, like people aren't going to be able to hide ultimately.
Right. There we go. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. No, it's just like one of those things that for mass adoption, you can already see it. Like all governments and regulators are trying to get their approach right. It's taking them a long time, but in the end, we're not going to be able to move around crypto at a large scale for mass consumers without KYC, AML everywhere.
You're right. They just had the Elizabeth Warren clip that was everywhere of her telling the guy, like, can you move this much money? And the bottom line is there's not enough liquidity to pull any of those big things out. Like these huge hacks and stuff, it takes so much to move these things around. And these are ledgers of history that are not being erased. So people think that they're sending coin and nobody's going to know what it is from X address to another. But if you do a few things that people have to start looking, it's not as private as you think it is. And that's something I think that the BSV community agrees on and is absolutely right about, is that this is a ledger of truth. This is something that is, if you think you're getting away with something, well, time will tell. And you're leaving a track of what you're doing, and that's what this is. And I think you're right, Jimmy. I have looked at this in this way for a long time, and it's really interesting to hear your perspective on this entire development. So thank you for sharing it with us. It's great to hear.
Yeah, this is really incredible, Jimmy.
Behind the scenes, really what sparked a lot of it wasn't just about that block size in that one moment. It was about the long-term purpose of what the network should be. I'll give you one last example. One of the key Bitcoin Cash proponents, who I won't name, but one of the obviously the most visible ones at the time, on the other side of the battle with us. We talked once, he and I, about a disagreement over a certain opcode that the developers were all, fighting about. And neither he nor I are super technical people. We understand enough to help lead our various contingents. But he said to me, I don't really care which opcode is used as long as we can have a permissionless token system on Bitcoin Cash. And what he means by that is the ability of a token issuer, let's say, the RAD company, right? To issue a token that once the token is issued and put out live into the world, nobody can restrict it, control it, confiscate it, revoke it, freeze it. That's what a permissionless token system means. Like you need permission to continue using it or transfer it or do anything with it. And the problem with that, as I said to this key advocate on the Bitcoin Cash side, is, well, then no real company would use that.
Right.
No real company would use that if you have no control over what happens to your tokens after they're put into, out onto the blockchain. So if you were going to think about tokenizing the stock of a public company, Apple will never use that type of system if it loses control over the tokens that represent the stock.
Yeah.
It can't comply with laws, for example, that
the people
restrict.
can just lose the stock at that point. I mean, like, if the stock was issued and gone forever, I don't think they really understand that. If they, it's like you're
Not just
throwing away
that,
pieces.
Yeah, like for example, companies make rewards points and loyalty programs all the time, right? Airline points. I used to have to advise clients about this when I was a lawyer. If you read any loyalty program terms and conditions, those long things, right? They say that the points and reward systems really are at the control of the company. They can revoke your points at any time, right? And they put all these other restrictions. They restrict who you can transfer them to, and you can't convince any real company. You can debate whether it's right or wrong, but they won't make their loyalty programs on a token, on a blockchain, if they don't have any control over what happens to the token. And if you are a company in the US, you have to comply with all of these sanctions laws, right? Like you can't have your stock transferred to someone in North Korea or in Cuba. Right? How would you prevent that if the token system is completely permissionless? If you're RAD and they've got their ARA token, right? If you want to be able to say, hey, I want to restrict people because I need to from sending this token to someone who I know is engaging in illegal behavior, right? For example, using my system to distribute illegal content. You need the ability as a company to operate in a real world business situation to be able to manage that.
Right. So let's jump into this of talking about management of these types of data and metadata and files. Jimmy, do you own any NFTs?
Only a couple. Only a couple. I have a Duro dog, which is, so shout out to the team at Unbounded Enterprise. That is one of the companies in the BSV ecosystem. And they work with Handcash and some of the other, cool BSV companies. So they released a NFT. It's not really a series. It's like you can create your own collectible dog. Like, remember the Crypto Kitties, right? You create your own dog. And then now they're developing games around that. So your dog over time gains, experience and qualities, and you can add cool, dress up your dog. So I own a Duro dog.
Awesome.
That I will admit I haven't played with my Duro dog in a while, so he's probably very lonely. And then I can't wait to own an NFT on Rad.
Yes.
But the other NFT, I own one more, which is my friend Todd Williamson, who is a very successful contemporary artist in Los Angeles. So one of my friends from LA I've known for many, many years. He started kind of playing around with NFTs like a lot of artists did a couple of years ago, but didn't really understand, NFTs at all. Right? He's from a generation that doesn't deal with, blockchain and Twitter that much. And so I convinced him to, make some NFTs on BSV. So I connected him with the team at Bullish Art, bullishart.com, which runs a contemporary art marketplace for NFTs on BSV. And they helped him develop NFTs. So he's put out several series, including a tulip series, because you know how BSV people love tulips. In honor of the famed Tulip Trust, Dr. Wright and his family. So I own a tulip NFT because it's my friend. I felt like I got him to do these NFTs on BSV. I should,
at least support him if you talked him into it. Yeah, good call. Good man.
Yeah. But no, he's a good example of, he did an interview with our, organization. He loves the BSV experience, partly because he said it was so much more user friendly. Then he's like, I don't get this MetaMask wallet thing, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do over here on Ethereum. And so he liked our focus on utility, usefulness. That's a big message I put out all the time. Make blockchain useful. So,
hey, Michael Finney is a speaker here. He's a frequent guest on NFTV. Thanks for joining us, Michael. And he actually pointed me to the Duro dogs when they first came out, and I went in and checked them out. Michael, thank you for that. And small world coming full circle pretty quick.
Nice. And I don't own them myself yet, but I know some of the BSV game companies have created NFTs of me. So there's apparently one in crypto fights that you can unlock if you get to certain levels.
Awesome. So go ahead, Michael.
So we're like a couple of years into BSV kind of evolving and developing, and a lot of content layers emerging on top of it. I personally think of different protocols as essentially different flavors or distributions, say like in the Linux sense, or even various webs, right, that kind of exist atop the protocol. What are some of the best things you're seeing? You exist at a pretty high level state within the BSV community beyond NFTs, right? I know that's kind of owned the conversation for the last year or so, but beyond that, what are you seeing and liking that's been emerging?
Great question.
Jimmy?
Good question. On the NFT front, I like NFT concepts where there's a long-term use of the NFT, right? There's nothing wrong with digital art, digital content NFTs, but I think their time line of utility is pretty limited. So
That's fair.
I've been, yeah, because remember what an NFT is. It's supposed to be just a token that represents something that has value in its uniqueness, right? Non-fungible.
For me, I always think of it as just like content distribution and monetization. It is the fungibility aspect is a misnomer in my opinion, because these things can be tokenized against.
Right.
So then it kind of inverts that proposition.
I look at it differently. I think the use of NFTs to sell and distribute digital content have confused what an NFT is, right? Because an
They definitely
NFT
have, yes. Yeah.
can be, it's because this is where friends of mine get confused. They're like, I don't get it. Why should I pay $100,000 for a picture of an ape, right? And I'm like, well, it's because I can't even do anything with the ape. And so it's been confused with what are sort of collectibles when that is one use of NFTs, but there are bigger uses. I'll give you an example of a project I've been trying to get off the ground, which is to take trees, right? And in, let's say, a city park, and you tokenize each tree, and then you can represent them, and each tree is an NFT. You can represent them in an AR, VR world, for example, maybe Transmira, which is a BSV company, could support this. And you offer the NFTs to the public for sale, and the NFT represents, let's say, you claim of not ownership, but that this is I get to adopt this tree for a year, like people like to adopt a park bench or a beach or a highway. Mm-hmm. And the money that is raised from your buying of the NFT to represent your claim to the tree for a year is put into a city fund that helps take care of the park and increases the environmental sustainability goals of that particular area. If there's ever carbon credits that are earned from the decrease in carbon dioxide emissions, maybe you as the NFT holder will get a portion of that from the city or whoever is the issuer of these tokens. Right. That to me is an example. I was trying to find an example of what do I think is a more useful NFT. Because remember, a tree is unique. Every tree in the world is unique, right? You don't have to what I call manufacture uniqueness, which is what happens now a lot in the NFT digital content space. Let me make 20 versions of this ape, right, with all slightly different, very little changes. That to me, that's manufacturing uniqueness. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's not inherently unique. Whereas taking and tokenizing the trees that exist in our world, everyone is unique. And there is what's the value in that uniqueness? You can attach value to it with environmental sustainability goals and carbon credits. Is that the perfect answer? No, but I was trying to identify an example that people could understand more easily. Like, what would be a better use of NFTs? That's one. But long term, in terms to answer your main question of what else am I seeing around the world that I find very exciting in the BSV land, I would say it's simpler, but the push to use micropayments for play to earn games, I think is going to be a powerful use case with things like Haste Arcade as well as Crypto Fights, some of the other games that are coming into fruition. I do like the Transmira's got some exciting things coming down the pipeline. I can't talk about. I actually just got some messages from Robert Rice overnight. I can't tell you where he is, but he's trying to get something big done.
Love Omniscape, big fan.
Yeah, but metaverse technologies and applications are going to take a long time. I think people are being overly optimistic about all this metaverse talk. There's a lot of hype about it, and I think it's important. But in terms of really
that's a dagger, Jimmy.
Yeah, dagger, man.
Well, I mean, their roadmaps aren't really too promising as they haven't developed tons of stuff in the space. That's something we talk about frequently on here. Is a lot of these roadmaps aren't from teams that have delivered on anything of the size that they are claiming to be delivering. And it's You know, it's one thing if your team is doxxed. It's another if you're a non and nobody knows what's going on. I mean, if our team, everybody on here right now as speakers has LinkedIn's, and you can go see what they've done. A lot of these teams don't have that. Jimmy, you brought up the not too unique, and that is a question that we've had very often the past couple weeks. And I see we have a couple people that have requested. We will get to you. I'm wondering what you're seeing with these apes, and I have a feeling you're kind of seeing things the same way I am. Of what rights does anyone actually hold here? And you know, they're changing. Somebody owns a Bored Ape, and then they're changing the fur. They're changing the eyes. They're adding clothes. They're putting a hat on it. Now, if all of them dress up the same, now who owns what? And who's infringing on whose rights? If you can just change anything about it and say this is my ape, then how are you seeing that developing in the space? Do you think this is going to get really messy and we're headed towards an era of massive lawsuits, or is that not going to happen because there's no real value there?
I both. I think is the answer. I think there are going to be a series of lawsuits. You're already seeing some from users who lost access to their NFTs because of errors, let's say, or bugs in the OpenSea's platform. But that's not about IP infringement. That's just about loss. But let me explain a concept in copyright law, because this is really what your question triggers. In copyright law, you see a lot of these cases in Hollywood. Someone sues another person for writing a script, a poem, releasing a piece of art that they think looks like and is based upon their work, right? Infringes their copyright. And in copyright law in the United States, the standard you have to prove is that if you're claiming there's infringement, that the other work is substantially similar to yours. That's the term, substantial similarity, right? And making a few changes to a work is not enough to make it a completely different work. And so when you have all of these different, whether it's an ape or a cat or a dog, and different little variations, they're not that different, really. Right. And when you try to make just a few changes in traditional copyright, law, that's usually not enough to make it distinctive enough, right? That's exactly the kind of situation where you could say, hey, that's actually substantially similar to my work and you're infringing my work. So what I think how the NFT world needs to deal with this, and I haven't seen anyone deal with this very well yet, but I did talk to one of the BSV companies yesterday who's, I'll be giving some advice to figure out how they're going to deal with it, is the question of when you buy an NFT, what rights do you get? Right, as the buyer, the owner of an NFT. Let's say I own one of the versions of an ape or a Durodog. What is it that I'm getting? Right? I own, because there's no license provision or sales contract provided. Right? There's no posted terms and conditions most of the time.
Right.
The thing I equate it to is like the Creative Commons. I think a lot of these folks are actually not necessarily giving away copyrights or trademarks. I think that they're actually putting this into the public domain. I think that by their action alone of not clarifying the rights and then just making it publicly available, and in addition to the fact that they can be sold amongst a bunch of different people. So like if you have been the initial purchaser of that NFT and they're saying, okay, well, you have such and such rights, and then you sell it to somebody else, like what rights do you retain? Well, maybe it's not about retaining rights, but falling into a designation of Creative Commons that is already has legal precedent. There's already a model for it.
Or bigger question isn't just if I transfer my ape to you. What if, okay, I own an ape and I transfer it to you, right? I sell my ape to you, but then I go and create my own ape that looks just like the one I just sold to you. That's technically a different NFT, right?
Right. And so I guess then the thing kind of comes down to the hash, right? Because that's always going to be a unique symbol.
Right.
And the content layer that exists on top of it.
This is where the technical functions of the hash, right, and what defines the asset, the NFT, is different than how the law would look at it. The law would look at it in two respects. Well, what were the rights that you had in the first place of the NFT and that you transferred to someone if you sold it? And then secondly, are you prevented by general copyright law from creating a new artwork, right? A new dog, a new ape or whatever that looks very similar to the one that you've now sold to someone else.
Right. And they are giving derivative rights to the holders. So there are millions of these of, I'll just take one and add this little thing to it. And now it's its own token and they had the rights to do so.
Yeah. But I think your point about the Creative Commons license approach is a good one. In fact, I was thinking about that yesterday, which is what I think needs to happen in the NFT space is when you're an issuer, right? When you're creating you're saying, I'm going to mint a set of NFTs, whether they are, dogs, apes, rainbows, whatever it is. As the issuer, you normally, having created the artwork, would own the artwork initially, right? Yeah. And then when you offer it to the public for sale, I think what needs to be made clear, and it could be through a version of a Creative Commons license, maybe that was created specifically for NFTs, that you say, okay, this asset is being offered for sale under X license terms, right? Click here and you can read them all, right? And then so then if you're the buyer, what you're getting or not, and what happens if you sell and continue to transfer the license, because right now it's just unclear.
100%. You know what? Here's another question for you too. As a follow-up, because I think you guys were alluding to this when I first got in here, which is kind of like the data management aspect of BSV, right? So how familiar are you with information security, particularly the concepts of like file integrity management or change detection?
Fairly, familiar. I used to handle, information security related legal issues back in my legal days, and was a certified information privacy professional as well.
Perfect.
So what's your question?
Yeah. So then how, kind of moving forward, right? We have these intellectual property issues, right? And we have these data integrity components. And I think that there's probably a Venn diagram that can be drawn to see okay, where are these things overlapping? And it's kind of just going to fall into that space. That's kind of how I look at it. I'm just kind of curious if that's something that you guys have been thinking about or
Not specifically, but I do think that is the next step. I think that with NFTs, the first critical step is for there to be a more widely recognized practice and system of defining up front what are the rights that somebody is offering when they mint and offer for sale NFTs, and what are the rights that the buyer has, right? Because if you have let's say you have a set of 100 dogs, right? The dogs are all very similar, right? So as the buyer of a single dog NFT, one of 100 different variations, you can't really expect to be able to say nobody else can have a similar looking dog, because there's 99 other people who are going to get similar looking dogs, right? So so certainly you don't have rights to stop the other NFT purchasers from from doing things with their dog. But it's a much more interesting question if someone who doesn't buy one of the original set of 100 dog NFTs, someone separate comes along and makes a new set of NFTs with similar looking dogs. Is that who's got the rights? You see what I'm saying? It's an interesting question, and I think it can help to have easily understandable, repeatable, whether they're a license or some other kind of electronic contract that states more clearly up front when someone's buying the NFT to try to define this. Because right now, NFTs are minted and issued and sold on these marketplaces with pretty much nothing attached to them in terms of legal provisions.
Well, do you think that's due to
100%,
precedence?
man.
Is that just because we don't have any precedence yet, or just no clarification from the issuers?
I think it's no clarification from the issuers, and no one really thought about it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Meta, go ahead with your question, and thank you for being patient. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. Hey, what's up, Jimmy? How are you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, I had a question about what your thought. I wanted to see what your thoughts were on interoperability on BSV. The different token protocols and all that are being built in. And, there's a lot of new people that we bring on and talk to about BSV. One thing they'll say is, how come I can't put my Relay X NFT on Twitch or something like that? And I know that no one's centrally controlling anything, right? So it's like you can't really, no one can standardize something. But I guess I wanted to get your opinion on that. Like, do you think the competition will pan out the way it should in a free market, and then something will emerge, that will kind of reign victorious in terms of the tokens, or what do you think about it?
Oh, it's a very important question. I was just talking with Phil Runyon about it yesterday. Who's been thinking about this, especially as he launches his Nifty Co. NFT minting service. It's an important issue. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It would be easier if there was just defined token standards on BSV. Right, here's the one token standard everyone's going to use for NFTs. Right, and then all of the wallets adopt it. It would make things much easier. It's essentially what happens on Ethereum. Not quite, but it's essentially what happens there. The problem is who decides that, right? We get enough flack, as you probably read about from Twitterverse if you follow BSV, about whether the Bitcoin Association or companies associated with Calvin Ayre control everything, right? And so the association doesn't itself pick things like this. There is a technical standards committee which goes through a process with public review to set standards. And what I've told people is go, submit a proposal to the technical standards committee. Even if it's something selected as a standard, you can't force everyone to use it, but the standards only get adopted if it achieves a sort of majority usage from ecosystem companies. So I do think it would be easier. I do hope this shakes out because I do recognize it's harder. It's something I talk about it behind the scenes. But then, the thing is, if I and our team at the Bitcoin Association decided which standards to use, then we get complaints from people in the ecosystem. So it's kind of like who should decide?
Great question, Meta. Peace, you had... Go ahead, Meta. Sorry.
Thanks, Jimmy. Oh no, I just was saying thank you. Yeah,
that's.
I'm glad that there's the conversations being had or people are thinking about it. But I do think the competition maybe it'll be interesting to see what pans out between all of it. Maybe something will emerge.
I hope it. I do too, because I do think it's not good long term for there to be too many competing protocols.
Yeah.
So I do hope that some surface to the top, whether through market forces or other things, that become more the de facto standard.
Peace. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead with your question.
Yes. Thank you so much for for giving this opportunity. Basically, my question is for Jimmy. What is his thoughts about EVM compatibility on Bitcoin SV chain as a layer? Like, what are his thoughts? And as well as Meta's question was about interoperability in the layer of Bitcoin SV. So it can be achieved. I think we are I'm working on a project which are working on building this interoperability aspects into all different chains. So what are your thoughts, Jimmy? Thank you.
I think the question was about what I think about achieving interoperability with Ethereum.
Yep.
Long term, as people have heard me talk about, I'm a big believer in a world with one dominant blockchain. Like we have one internet. It would make life easier for everyone. And only BSV has the scaling vision and path that could create a blockchain to sustain that. With that said, that day's not happening anytime soon, right? The blockchain world has fractured into too many competing chains. And so I do think there's a value in trying to seek applications that achieve interoperability with existing chains. Craig Wright talks essentially about the BSV blockchain swallowing up the other chains in terms of it, being a more efficient base layer. That could happen. I don't think in the BSV world we need to go try to achieve interoperability with every chain, but the realities of the market, forces of market competition is if you want to get onto platforms that support multiple chains, you may need to offer solutions to people to, for example, port NFTs from one blockchain to BSV if people want, or vice versa, or to have smart contracts that are interoperable. It's complicated and it creates security risk, as people have seen from some of the losses of coins from some of these bridges between chains. but I'm not opposed to it. I do think there's value in it, and it's the reality of the fact that we have too many chains and they're not going away anytime soon. I do think it will consolidate to a few lead chains, but I'm not one of those people who feels that BSV applications should not seek to achieve some interoperability when appropriate with other chains.
Yes. Thank you, Jimmy. Miss Like, I completely understand. Uh, Basically, Miss Like, my main question was that what do you think if we want to bring EVM compatibility only respective to Ethereum? Because most of the activity we see is around Miss Like, no, most of big projects like Uniswap and these kinds of projects like Decentraland, everything is on Ethereum itself. So if they want to Miss Like, use the fast transactions on BSV, or they want to port, so we can like bring EVM compatibility on it. So what are your thoughts on it?
Uh, we are an open blockchain ecosystem. People can do anything they want as long as it's lawful and responsible. And I think if people find solutions to take what are Ethereum functions and use BSV as a base layer to make them more cost and speed efficient, go for it. That's what I say.
Yeah, and they already do. They already are doing this with wormholes and bridges,
Yes.
and this is already started. I mean, a lot of people here I'm talking to people in this space regularly about these things, and there are people using the wormhole, which is what they're calling a layer 0, and the layer 0 is just for transferability and interoperability. It's not for storage and long-term ledger. And I think that will win in time. Of that fight is being fought, and there will be a winner.
Yeah. In the ideal world, we want companies and developers and applications to build all of their functions on BSV. But the reality is most companies, if they've already built something on Ethereum, they're going to be hesitant to completely move off the blockchain. Some have done that, CryptoFights being a perfect example, but it took them, a good 2 years of development and investment to, get fully functioning on BSV. And it takes time. And so I think for a bridge period, if you want to call it that, I do foresee a future where companies have, say, certain of their functions still on Ethereum, but certain functions on BSV.
Right.
I could foresee that definitely happening. Because the other challenge is that when I talk to companies and government agencies, they're concerned about making the right choice. Am I choosing the right blockchain? Right. It's, because there's so many. How do I know this is the right choice in 6 months or 12 months? And the reality is you don't really know. So I think a lot of companies and developers are trying to hedge their bets and trying to find solutions that, pick one that they think is a good functioning one, but to, use other chains if necessary for certain portions of the function.
Great answer. I love that. Extra, you've been patient. Thank you for waiting, and you're welcome to ask your question now if you'd like.
Hello, Jimmy. I just want to say I love you and I love the work you do for BSV community. And I have a question. You guys recently were in Saudi Arabia and you signed a contract with the Saudi government to start a BSV Academy. And what is this BSV Academy about? Because there's not much details online about it.
Sure. Yeah. So what we did is sign a memorandum of understanding with the Saudi Digital Academy, which is an initiative of the Ministry of Communications and IT in the kingdom, to launch the kingdom's first ever blockchain academy, which we focus on BSV. I'll tell you the general purpose and then what the current status is. Generally, the Saudi Digital Academy's mission is to provide training and education to skill up for job skill training people in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for all kinds of fields. They didn't have a blockchain academy. We're helping them think through the steps of that. So our long-term goal is to provide an academy, which will be a mix of in-person, online, and other forms of education that trains a wide range of audiences: students, developers, business executives, government representatives, entrepreneurs. Our proposal we've just made recently to the team at the Saudi Digital Academy is start with an enterprise executive certificate program that we've laid out the outlines of. So this is all still in discussion. Basically, we signed this memorandum of understanding, we announced it. Now we're at the phase of working with the Saudi Digital Academy to plan what will be the elements of the academy and what steps. We're recommending we start with an executive program and move to developer education training later in the year. So stay tuned. It's in the planning stages. Is in short.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Jimmy, you guys are doing so much globally with governments. What is the feedback you're getting from governments? Are there headwinds there? And most people would think of governments as big, slow-moving entities, and you're talking about them wanting to be right because they can't make a mistake and get a year down the road and have made the wrong choice. Is this something that you're seeing that they just need to hear the right words and then they're understanding what the right choices are? Or is there a lot of education going into this and time spent educating these governments about what's going on?
There is definitely time spent educating governments, but if you look closely, look at the governments we're really trying to engage with. It's not necessarily the Western governments, right? We've really focused on governments in the Middle East region as well as some other regions where one, there's a huge appetite for digital technology transformation and blockchain. For example, the government of the UAE announced a few years ago that by 2030 they want over 50% of government activity and transactions to be on blockchain, which is what has led to a huge explosion of blockchain activity and interest. Saudi Arabia has what they call Saudi Vision 2030, which is a goal by 2030 to digitally transform the entire kingdom, diversify its economy away from dependence on oil, and expand many other things in the region, including making it one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world. That's why they're interested in not just blockchain, but AI and robotics and autonomous vehicles, many other things. So we're starting with governments that have really announced their intention to adopt blockchain and other industrial revolution 4.0 technologies. We're also chosen to really start with governments, which, I'll be blunt, especially as an American, are strong. I won't call them autocratic governments, but they are governments that they're not democracies.
Right. Well, people are making decisions quickly, not a bunch of roadblocks and red tape. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in the United States, there are great virtues to our political system, right? But getting decisions made that require huge expenditures or shifts in infrastructure, right, whether it's technological or business for our government, takes a lot longer. Let's just be honest. And so it doesn't mean I'm not interested in bringing blockchain technology to government levels in the United States. But in terms of reality, it's going to take longer. So when you're talking about where to look at government opportunities, the Middle East governments want blockchain and other new digital technologies. They have money to invest in it, are willing to do so, have announced intentions to be aggressive in this space. And it also overlaps well with our BSV vision, right? You create a big global blockchain with a micropayment system that can power data for IoT, smart cities, robotics, everything that runs an entire nation. And so that's why we've started focusing there. It doesn't mean we don't talk to other governments, but it's been, in terms of the reception, the general reaction is, we like your message a lot. They love the fact that when I and the BSV team goes in there, we focus on utility, utility, utility. They don't like to hear about, they don't like the crypto trading talkers, right? They know crypto trading happens, but that's not what they're interested in. Yeah, like I'll give you an example. After some of my trips to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, what I was told is that, you're one of the first blockchain groups to make, penetration here in terms of an impact. And it's because people just really like your message. They've also said, hey, we really like your blockchain. With that said, there are concerns that come up about, is this related to cryptocurrency, right? Because we also have to live with the counteracting bad impressions that government leaders have of cryptocurrency. And so I have to sort of educate people around that, or the relationship of BSV to the Bitcoin protocol. And what's interesting for those of you who are BSV fans is I tell them, look, the BTC camp is really what kind of screwed up Bitcoin to make it like this speculative investment asset that's not really useful for anything. We want to actually take its original power and protocol as a technology network and make it really useful. So I think the reaction is, we like your message. We like your focus on data utility. We like you, you all, because, another way I'll be blunt. What I get told is I don't come in and look like, one of the crypto people.
Yeah. I remember when John Anthony, our CEO, and V in Brooklyn all went to New York, for the first NFT NYC. That was their feedback as well as, no, that's not the party we're going to.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a great transition into this question that I know a lot of people here would not appreciate an answer on, but maybe just some more insight, especially from you being at the tip of the spear of BSV for so long. It works. And for some reason, it's not listed on any exchanges here in the States. And you bring up, that other countries with less democratic regimes are much more open. What is the reason that you feel these exchanges here are refusing to list? And even as far as like OKCoin's April Fool's joke, that's from a business. That's a company putting that out about another company as part of their messaging. And to me, it rubs me and a lot of people in the space that I know personally the wrong way. And I'm just interested to know, like, if there's any insight there you can give us. Is it because they don't want to lose? Is that it?
No, my view of it is quite simple. It's dislike of Dr. Craig Wright.
And that's
Yeah,
so
that-
just
that-
personal. It's just a personal dislike of whatever philosophical choices these businesses are making, and they're saying we don't align with that, and that's the line they're drawing there of a person
Yeah,
for something that works.
it's not that it's not that the exchanges come out and say that exactly in those words. We are listed on some exchanges in the United States. It's not that there aren't some.
Absolutely. Yeah, I use Bittrex, and there are several. Yeah.
Yeah, plug for Bittrex. I'm a Bittrex
I love
US
Bittrex.
customer as
Yeah,
well.
love them.
Robinhood, which now has enabled wallet functions to send and receive, so that they're
fantastic.
Good.
That's great for BSV. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then and there's at least one other that's intending to list BSV in the near future once certain other steps get put in place behind the scenes. So, but in terms of the big ones like Coinbase, Kraken, some of the others, not just in the U.S. around the world. Yeah, it is because of reaction to Craig Wright, and I think that's unfortunate.
That is
that's
unfortunate. Yes.
When I've talked to exchanges, I'm empathetic to their reaction. I get it. I get why Craig triggers negative reactions. With that said, I tell them to look at the asset as an asset, right? Does it meet your listing requirements, right? And what are your criteria? Most of them barely have criteria.
That's
but,
yeah. That's what I'm learning.
What are your criteria? And also I point to the significant usefulness of the chain, all the applications that are out there, all the things we're doing with governments, and so we make all the arguments we can with listing, and we have a team of people in the association that is tasked with outreach to the exchanges to try and get listed on more and more exchanges. With that said, it's not that I want to discount exchanges, but long term, I think there's going to be a future with use of the currency and BSV that is not so dependent on exchanges.
I agree.
But in the meantime, I recognize it's not lost on me that they play an important role in the current digital asset ecosystem. They affect liquidity, the price of the coin, which of course everyone feels is important to look at, and I'm not discounting that either. But it is I'll be blunt. It's frustrating where I and lots of people on behalf of BSV work our butts off to really be what I think are the most responsible people in the blockchain and digital asset world. Really focus on building utility, getting real projects done, engaging with government. And we still can't get some of the, supposedly leading exchanges in the world to list the coin. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I think these exchanges they're in for a rough ride. As we talk amongst the BSV community pretty frequently that let's see a run on these exchanges and let's see how many coins they've really sold to people, and let's see if there's a liquidity problem between these exchanges, and at some point that will be exposed. I believe. I mean, they're already doing it with Cash App. They're basically holding your crypto. It's not your wallet. And if they're doing that, there's no reason that they wouldn't sell the future at some point, unless they were extremely fiscally responsible and not taking any risks at all. And I would say that some of these exchanges are probably taking some risks that they may or may not should have taken, or may have not seen the result. They're not going to see the result they're expecting, maybe.
Yeah, and that may very well be true. I guess I spend less time being, conspiracy theorist among all of us. But I don't think that's the reasons why some of these exchanges have chosen to not list BSV, or the ones that had like OKCoin, but to delist BSV.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the reason at all. I think it is purely their reaction to dislike of Craig and how he has, taken certain actions. I don't agree with them,
Right.
and I've told them that. But it's in my experience, that's what it is.
Well, it's just, we're still so early here, and we're having a conversation about the earliest Bitcoin forks. And how many other Bitcoin forks do we not talk about? A lot. And I mean, who knows how many Bitcoin forks there are? Somebody could be at their house just spinning up forks all day long and doing nothing with them. But there is something to be said about we're very early. And the fact that we're able to discuss this history right now so thoroughly because it's so new, it's just happened. I mean, we're 5 years in and it's still being written and it's so fresh. We always wonder, will that be the case in 20 years? Is anybody even going to talk about who forked what or what name is behind what? It's going to be what works. And BSV works right now. So it's just a matter of time before people aren't asking these questions that are have religious tones of like who they're going to support philosophically or what energies they get behind. It's just going to be what system works. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I say this all the time because I get asked all the time around the world, especially by reporters, why are you asking people to support BSV because Craig's so controversial, and why he hasn't proved he's Satoshi Nakamoto, so how can you ask people to support BSV? I get asked those kinds of questions.
Sure.
And my answer is consistently the same. I do believe Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto, but I don't ask a single person to invest in, build upon, support, use BSV because he is or is not Satoshi Nakamoto. I ask people to look at BSV, to support it, to build on it, because we believe it has the technical functionality to be the most useful blockchain in the world. That's it. And that's the only thing that matters long term. That's the only way any of this survives, but beyond our lifetimes. It's the only reason I got interested in doing what I'm doing is to help, bring useful technology to the world that's not just used for, cute trading of assets back and forth for a little bit. So that's the only thing that matters and will matter in 20 years. And that's why I'm focused on the utility so much. But it is frustrating because we live in the realities of the business world where you still need support, help from other businesses to be successful. In this case, exchanges, or sometimes other companies when you're asking them to partner or do things with you, right? And they don't want to sometimes because of their reaction to Craig Wright, and that's it. It affects BSV's reputation. I'm not, it's not. Everyone knows it, so it's not. I'm not saying anything people don't already realize.
Right.
And we do everything we can to counteract that and to focus on utility. And I personally exert a lot of my, how do I call it? Personal credibility. I put on the line that people don't see. They see me talking on stages and speaking and doing interviews like this. But what they don't see behind the scenes is how much I and other people who are allies use our personal credibility to try and get businesses, governments, people to talk to consider BSV, whether it's listing on an exchange, whether it's doing a business partnership, anything. People, we don't get the benefit of the doubt as a digital asset. We have to really go in and exert our personal credibility.
I appreciate you doing that work, King. I know it's probably frustrating and feels like you're probably not making as much progress as you are, and we all see it, and like I definitely see it, and I see the BSV network growing all the time, and new people talking about it all the time, and it's a great thing to see in the space of fork wars, and I think you're right of how long 10, 20 years, people aren't talking about that. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time, and that's a perfect lead into, and I'll get to your question in 1 minute, Hooligan. I'll get you. Jimmy, how far out do you think we are? You've been at the tip of Bitcoin for the entire time almost. How far out are we from a global adoption? Are we 20, 50 years? I know you stabbed NFTs earlier for Michael. Let's how far out do you think we are?
We're definitely not 50 years. I do think and it depends what you mean by global adoption, right?
Gosh, there's a
I
lot of
think
definitions. Yeah.
yeah. I think in terms of seeing really widespread usage in everyday life, whether it's visible or invisible, which I'll address in a second, probably 5 years, 5 to 10. If we're
Wow.
like the early days of the internet, where, I think there will be some uses, like we're seeing now with NFTs. But, once you buy the NFT, no one really uses them for most things. That's why hopefully some of the games coming on BSV will make experiences that people want to be using, these NFTs on a more regular basis. So I think I'm not one of these people who, like, I'm always, more cautious than, overly optimistic. I think, 5 to 10 years is probably about right to seeing, BSV and blockchain being used at a level where I foresee a future where, honestly, the most of the world will be using something on a blockchain, hopefully ours, and they won't even realize it's BSV or on a blockchain. It just is. That's when I think there will be, quote, global adoption. Now everyone's focused on crypto because crypto got all the media attention because of price trading, investment trading, right? But in the future, the global adoption of what is BSV and blockchain will be in everyday lives. That's not about, buying a coin on exchange and hoping the number goes up.
Right. I really appreciate that you think it's only 5 to 10 years, somewhere in that range, because that's kind of where I think similarly as well. I think we have a lot. Do you think that's a killer app that we're waiting on, or do we just need more devs in the space that are providing better UXs that people don't even realize what they're doing?
Yes and yes. All the above.
Great.
I think that more ease of usability is important. That's something I think I'm very proud that the BSV world is really focused on, better user interfaces so that it's easy to use for the everyday person. More devs, super important. But yeah, we need some breakthrough app moments. Right. And in my role, with the Bitcoin Association, we don't make the applications. We can help facilitate these processes and support companies. But it'll take companies like RAD, right, doing things on BSV, and with your significant outreach plug for RAD, with, your platform available on 500 million, Sony PlayStation devices, as well as Apple and other Android devices. I think you can be a real driver in making BSV functionality useful to a global audience without them even realizing it. It'll take moments like that. It'll take games like Crypto Fights and others exploding even more than they have been. It'll take some good, enterprise government applications being used as with BSV as sort of infrastructure and data plumbing. It'll take a number of those things. But yeah, it'll take. I think it'll start with consumer applications, especially the games and esports world, or what we're doing with NFTs and live streaming, because that's what drives a lot of. It's faster to implement the enterprise and government. And for all those BSV people who are listening, who sort of question the focus that we placed on enterprise and government, I hear you. It's not a loss to me that takes longer, but it's important to do. We're a team that can start that process, pursue it, while we still also support the many consumer-facing applications, such as games and esports and live streaming.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, I think you guys are really hitting it from every angle and doing a fantastic job. I don't know if there's anybody doing as much for adoption as you all are, and I don't see it in the space. There's not too many people that are always out here talking the way the leaders of the BSV community are.
We are the challenge we face is that it looks like we have a less adoption because we don't get invited to the rest of the crypto and blockchain party, right? Sure. BSV is not on OpenSea and Rarible yet as a blockchain alternative. We'd like it to be, right? Because that makes it, then you're invited to the party, right? It's and so we've had to create our own party, but I think our party will eventually win out, but it's taking longer than it should, given our utility, and that is frustrating. I know it's frustrating for all the BSV supporters, but a lot of people stick in, they believe, and I think utility will win out, but it is a longer road. I always tell people, not that people don't want to make money in the BSV world, but you don't get into the BSV world to get rich instantly. You get into the BSV world because you want to build value over long-term utility.
Yep. Jimmy, you're a wonderful speaker, and it's been great hanging out with you today. Let's get this last question in, and then if anybody else has any last-minute questions, we don't want to take up too much of Jimmy's time. We told him an hour, and we got a little late start. So, Hooligan, go ahead with your question, please.
Hey, thanks, Rad, for having me up here, and thanks, Jimmy, for for speaking on Spaces today. Your insight's really valuable. I just wanted to get your perspective on something that Craig Wright had recently said. He had, in the last couple of weeks, he said something to the effect that BSV is going to run the transactions on all the other networks for free, something to that effect, kind of near term, like in the next year, and how that relates to the sort of miners that we have on the BSV network, the miner concentration, and to that effect, are we advocating for other miners of other networks to at least partake in processing these transactions on the BSV network, in the least case, at least just to sell the BSV that they're mining for fuel to pay for some of their operating costs, like they do with Zcash commonly. Just any of the insights you could provide on that.
I'm actually going to do something rare, which is say I'm not going to comment on it, mostly because I get what Craig is talking about. I've heard him talk about this in speeches. I think, and I haven't had a chance to talk directly with him about what he meant by that particular comment, because I have heard it. My sense of it is he's talking about what BSV is certainly capable of. Whether that's actually going to happen by the end of the year, I don't know. And I think it's certainly capable of sustaining the transaction capacity of all the other chains. But the path to make that happen is always more complicated. And of course, you have to get validators and other chains to to want to do this. So I'll leave it at that, which is I think I know what he's talking about in terms of the potential of BSV, but the path to get to what he's trying to articulate there, I'm less certain about.
And to the miner advocating for partaking in the BSV network like they do Zcash and others.
Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna say, I'll hold comments on that for a future day.
I respect it. I know Tony's got some thoughts on that, and like we've been kicking it around with Rad of how we're going to be reconciling things from other chains and other transactions on BSV, and our devs have some pretty great plans for that. Does anybody else have any questions today for King Jimmy before we let him go?
I don't have a question, but yeah, Jimmy, great to talk with you today. I thought you were incredibly candid, and that is, it's super refreshing, because I know that a lot of times BSV presents a very polished image inside of events, and I think that you were like very down to earth today.
Thank you. I mean, I'm a pragmatist at heart.
Yeah, I've loved our conversation today, Jimmy. I could talk to you. I have 500 questions. I could just keep asking you questions. I'm just not going to steal your time.
No, that's save those for drinks one night somewhere in the world.
Yes, King. I'm looking forward to meeting you, everyone. It's been great talking with Jimmy today. And Jimmy, you got a couple of things coming up with that you'd like to plug. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the BSV Global Conference again, and when that takes place, where it can be found online as well. Again, please.
Sure, yeah. So if you want to be following and learning more about what's happening in the BSV world, our next global event, no longer branded under the CoinGeek name, it'll be the BSV Global Blockchain Convention. Now moving to just once a year. So this is your only one this year. So it'll be just once a year going forward. Will be May 24th through 26th in Dubai. It's partly why I've been spending a lot of time there to sort of build up partnerships and opportunities that will really expand that event. You can attend in person, or it'll be live streamed as it has been in the past, and you can go register at globalblockchainconvention.com, globalblockchainconvention.com. We've already got a great lineup of speakers from the BSV world already committed to come. A number of companies will be unveiling new announcements, projects, which I've been talking to them about, so expect some exciting things happening. We're also getting a number of local dignitaries and speakers from the UAE, trying to get some people from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan as well. To really talk about, how we might be expanding blockchain usage in those countries. So we're definitely making it a super global event. I hope a lot of you come in person. It'll be the first one of these since the pandemic hit that I think people will be able to get to in person, as opposed to the more remote events we've done. So we hope you can make it to that BSV Global Blockchain Convention, May 24th through 26th in Dubai. I know Tony and Brooklyn will be there
Yep.
from Dubai because, you know, Brooklyn's become my Dubai buddy. So,
yeah,
So,
Tony will be Tony and Brooklyn will be speaking. I know Brooklyn's he's been talking about it for a couple months that about speaking there and preparing what he's going to deliver for RAD, and there's a lot of fun announcements going to be made there, and then the first week of June after the big announcements are made at that convention. So looking forward to it. King Jimmy,
awesome.
Thank you very much for your time today, sir, and it has been lovely to hear about BSV from somebody as focused and as dialed in as you have been for the last 15, 20 years of IP law, and then that transition into Bitcoin has been really fun to hear about. And I'd love to keep this conversation going, but like I said, we said an hour and we're about an hour and 20 minutes. So we're going to end it here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you check out and follow everything that Jimmy's doing. He's all over the place, speaking all the time. He's got a great Instagram account that's fun to keep up with, and you can visit bsvblockchain.com and make sure you check out that global event in Dubai, May 24th and 25th. I'm sure we'll be giving more details about that over the coming weeks as Brooklyn and Tony prepare to head on out there and speak. And that's it today. Michael, thank you for tuning in, my king. As always, Adam, Joby, Queen V, I see y'all. And that's it. Episode 10 of NFTV. We'll get it up everywhere here in just a little bit. As you all know, this will be put on Spotify, RAD, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, everywhere, and that'll be up later this afternoon. And thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for your questions, Hooligan, and everybody else that jumped in. Really appreciate it. And we will see you next Friday right here at noon. Jimmy, thanks again, King. You're fantastic, and safe travels the rest of the way home.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, keep believing in Satoshi Vision.
Absolutely. Yes. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you next time.